Hello, everybody. Greetings from our new temporary virtual youth classroom. We're not at the church, but the last time we had class, I was out in the outside. So this time I'm having the class inside in our office here at the house in Brandon. So just bear with me. I'm a little nervous looking at a camera. know y'all are watching. Um, for those who may not know me from Facebook or on Facebook, I'm Marsha. I'm with Faith Family Church of God. I'm one of the youth teachers. I'm one of the youth teachers, and like I said, I want to say welcome. And I like for you to participate by when I ask a question or you want to say anything, just say whatever you want. Robert's going to provide the scriptures for you in the upper right-hand corner. We're not going to have it written out. He's just going to tell you where to find it because there's so much of it. A scripture here and a scripture there, and some of them are full books, like the Book of Ruth and all that. So it's easier just to put the scripture in the corner for you for reference. Anyway, first I'm going to do is start with prayer. So let's bow our heads and pray. Dear Father in heaven, thank you so much for the technology that makes this possible. I'd love to have this in our homes like this. Thank you for good health and your protection. I ask that you give me the words that you want me to say at this time that our youth will understand and accept for themselves. In Jesus' name I ask, amen. Okay, we're going to start off with a question here. I want everybody to look at this glass or jar that has water in it. Comes up to here. I was going to put some food coloring in it, but I couldn't find my food color. But anyway, it comes up to here. And in your comments, I like for you to fill in this blank. This jar of water is half blank. Fill in the blank. We're going to give you 1 minute. Okay, welcome back. Robert's going to give us a tally of full or empty. That's what the blank's supposed to be. We're going to see how many we got of each. And he'll give us the tally of how many of us did one way or the other. Now I'm going to get started with the lesson. One thing is, we have special characteristics as a Christian that God expects us to hold up. We're using Jesus Christ. Christ is part of the name of Christian, and we are representatives of Him. And our characteristics or our mental attitude has to reflect that we are a Christian. If we have a different attitude, like what we're going to talk about tonight, people start wondering. They don't want to be like that. So we're going to get started class right now. The one thing is, got to remember, the Bible does say in Hebrews 10:25, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together. Okay, we don't have to go to church to be saved. I mean, like this right now tonight, we're in my house and my office. It's a virtual classroom for the youth and for anyone else that's watching. But we have to have that togetherness as Christians, and this is going to explain why in my thinking and from the scriptures that I have read. People go to bars. They want to be with people like them. If they're drinkers, they want to go to bars to drink. They go to different, clubs or whatever, because they want to meet people that they have something in common with. So that's one thing about church people, Christians. We go to church because we want to be with other people. We need to be with other people that think like us. Because I'm fixing to explain the difference between a pessimist and an optimist. And I'm going to squeeze in there somewhere a realist. Robert says he's a realist, but I'm fixing to explain to him why that's not good. But anyway, my main topic's going to be pessimism and optimism. Which one are you? And so this is what we're going to do tonight. And the first thing we need to know is the definition of each one. And the definition would be one thing that will distinguish who we are. Since we are in the middle of a very contagious pandemic right now, the Lord put on my heart to talk about something that we live with on a daily basis. It's a very contagious condition. It's a condition that a lot of people have, and they don't mind spreading it around because misery loves company, right? They spread it to their friends, their family. As a matter of fact, just like this virus we're fighting, people who have the condition do not even realize that they're pessimistic until someone says, you sure are grouchy, or you sure do complain a lot, or what is your problem, And sometimes you have to point it out to them. It doesn't mean it's going to help them. It's just going to verify yourself or confirm to yourself that, yes, they're pessimistic. They won't agree with anything. You can tell, hey, you need to go cut the grass. Well, they're going to say, well, I'll do it tomorrow, or the grass will be there tomorrow. It's no need to do it. I don't feel like doing it. There's no need to do it. Why should I do it? It's a pessimism. So this is what we're talking about right now. Like I said, the old saying, misery loves company, is true. However, there is a good news. There is an immediate cure for this condition, and it does not require a vaccine, and there is a medical name for these conditions. As a matter of fact, there are several Bible stories of people in the Bible who have these conditions. They're either pessimistic or they're optimistic, and I'm going to use them as my examples tonight. And you can see where you fit in, in your way of thinking. Okay. First of all, pessimism is a negative thought. Negativity. I looked it up to see if maybe it's part of drama. But you call a person that's pessimistic a drama queen or drama king. And it never did give me an exact answer, but I'm going to say a person who is pessimistic has a lot of drama, and they don't mind spreading it. Like I said, they want as many people involved as they can get. As a pessimistic person. Pessimism is a negative or depressed mental attitude in which an undesirable outcome is anticipated from a given situation. They tend to focus on the negatives of a life in general. Okay? They already have a negative attitude, a negative answer before they even start. That's what a pessimistic person is. These are some synonyms for pessimism: gloomy, negative, downbeat, gloom-ridden, cynical, dark, black, despairing, depressed, dejected, demoralized, hopeless, glum, suspicious, distrustful, doubting, alarmedness. I got depressed just reading it and typing it up. I said, boy, do we want to be around someone like that? Pessimism takes a toll on mental and physical health. It's associated with anxiety, depression, sleep orders, hostility, high blood pressure, and heart disease. And it can be contagious. Like I said, this is research. This didn't come popping up in my head. I actually did some research about pessimism. Pessimists have a negative attitude, and they expect the worst in most situations. Birds of a feather flock together. We have Christians, like I said, Christians want to go to church. We're not being able to do that right now. But thank the Lord we're able to do it this way. You can talk to me by typing, look over here, or you can at least see me or hear me while I'm teaching. So thank the Lord that we have this technology that has enhanced it to this point. Now, the cure for pessimism is optimism. Now, I like to think of myself as being optimistic. I mean, there are things that I could let bother me, but I don't have headaches. I've had people ask me, "Why don't you have headaches?" I said, "Because I don't worry." And that, to me, I think that's a good trait. Because when you have headaches or high blood pressure, whatever, um, you, I don't worry. Every once in a while things will pop in my head, but it don't stay there long enough to get a headache. I'll sort of push it out, but I'm thankful to say I do not get headaches. Very seldom, I put that way, unless I'm really, really sick, but I do not get migraines or anything. Optimism means it's positive. Hopefulness and confidence about the future or the successful outcome of something. The synonyms are totally the opposite from the pessimist. Hopefulness, hope, confidence, buoyancy, cheer, cheerfulness, positiveness. Optimism is an attitude that can positively affect a person's mental and physical health. Optimism can also help reduce a person's stress and increase longevity. It is looking at the positive aspects of things. It is also a hopeful anticipation that future events will be favorable. Basically, it is seeing and expecting the best in all things. So, even this, what this is saying, an optimist person, it may be the worst thing going on, but they're going to find something good in it. And to me, that's how a Christian's supposed to be. A Christian, no matter what's going on, should be able to say, well, I broke my foot last night, but it's going to get well. The Lord's going to heal me. I'm going to be walking in a few days. I'm not going to let it get me down. That's an optimist. A pessimist would say, I broke my foot last night. I'm going to stay in bed. I'm not going to get up. I can't walk. I can't do this, so don't ask me to do it. That's pessimism. So, like I said, from these stories I'm fixing to bring up from the Bible, you can tell who was a pessimist and who was an optimist and what you want to be. The qualities of an optimist is this. They're self-motivated. You don't have to have somebody coming up and say, get out of bed or go to work or do this or do that. They're self-motivated. They do what they need to do when they need to do it the way they should do it. And no complaints. They're happy to be able to do it. They surround themselves with other positive people. Like I said about church, you want to be around optimists. You don't want to be around a pessimist at this time. If you're an optimist, you do not want to have to be hanging around with someone that is a negative naysayer all the time. They bring you down. It's contagious. You don't want that. They don't listen to naysayers, and they're often happy and joyful. This is an optimist. And like I said, that's what I hope that I am. I pray that I am. Okay, I'm going to sneak in here the meaning of realist, since Robert claims to be a realist. Realism needs to be explained for a minute. A realist is those people who have the mental characteristic or belief that the outcome of a situation is based on what happened in the past. In other words, what happened yesterday, if you cut the grass and you got hurt, and first thing you're going to say, well, if they get up there and cut the grass again, they may get hurt again because it's a habit. They're always getting hurt when they cut the grass. So I don't want them cutting the grass. So they associate, what I researched, they associate a realist with a pessimist. They're not the same, but they're very close. They look at it as this is the only outcome possible. It is good up to a point. Where is God? This is my question when it's come to a realist. Where is God in this characteristic? They have the outcome decided before God has a chance to step in and do what he plans. At the end of this class, I will have a what-if list of a few optimistic people and pessimistic people. These are the ones I'm talking about in the Bible. It's very interesting. A realist is considered more of a pessimistic person. I'm sorry, Robert, but that's what the researchers say, babe. Now, we're going to start for the Bible, the characteristic, pessimistic people in the Bible. first one we're going to start with is Jonah. Jonah was called to preach in Nineveh. We know the story. But he argued with God and ran. He was so pessimistic because he wasn't even willing to try. He was not going. He was determined he was not going because if he knew that if he went to Nineveh and tried to preach and get out there and preach about God, that he would get killed, that they would kill him. He already knew the outcome, sort of like a realist. But in this case, we're calling him a pessimist because he ran. He ran, and we all know the story. He got swallowed up by a great whale. When he finally went to Nineveh and preached, he had a great revival. He came. They didn't kill him. It ended up like God had planned it to be. But the problem with Jonah was he took the credit. He was running from God, and he ended up in the belly of a great fish for 3 days. Okay, and then it spit him up, threw him up on the land. He ended up going to Nineveh, and after all that, he took the credit for it. God never used him again, according to the Bible. No, Jonah is not mentioned in the Bible again, and Jonah is only 4 chapters long. If you want to read and get a mental picture in your imagination, whatever, go to the book of Jonah and read those 4 chapters. Really interesting, and that's the only time he's mentioned. Now, the second group is a group. It says, when the Israelites left Egypt, okay? We've talked a lot lately about Moses and the Israelites and about the Pharaoh and about all the plagues and all that. So I'm going to put a little more spin on that because they were pessimistic people. They were led out of Egypt by Moses. And the Bible scholars, like I said, I've researched it. The Bible scholars believe there were around 2.4 million people. That includes some Egyptians that left also. So it's not just the Israelites. It's also the Egyptians. That's in Exodus 12:37. It's up on the screen. They were so pessimistic that after all the plagues, they went through the plagues, and the plagues didn't bother the Israelites. God protected them. Remember the blood over, the Passover, everything. All those plagues did not affect the Israelites, did not affect the people of Israel. It affected Egypt. They affected Egypt only. Now, these people weren't dumb. I mean, they had to have known what was going on in Egypt. They had to have seen it. So they knew God was in it. So they get to the Red Sea. Moses, of course, God parts the Red Sea, and the story of Pharaoh's army tries to follow them. They end up drowning. But you think about 2.4 million people, around 2.4 million people, and their livestock, all their belongings, everything they had, 2.4 million people crossing the Red Sea. Now, that took a little while. I'd say that took a little while. It didn't just take a few hours. It took a while for that many people to get across. Well, we know from Scripture that they complained. It says, even through all the plagues, the Red Sea, the food that God provided, they still complained and blamed Moses and God for bringing them out of Egypt to die in the wilderness. Okay, the only ones that crossed over into the Promised Land were Caleb and Joshua. We're going to talk about them in a few minutes. God allowed them to go into the Promised Land. Everyone else died. That's in Numbers 14:30. Now, that's not a very happy ending to think that God went to the extreme. He actually got them out of Egypt. They were begging for freedom, for God to do something to get them out of there. So he sent Moses. And we're going to talk about Moses, too, in a minute. But after all they went through to get to the other side, to get that close to the Promised Land, they complained. They were pessimists. We're going to die out here. We don't have food. They complained. There was nothing that Moses or God could do to make these people happy. So they didn't go in. God punished them. He let them all die. And the only ones that went in were Joshua and Caleb because they were optimists. We're going to talk about them in a few minutes. Then we're going to talk about Moses. Okay, Moses was a pessimist. Now, God called him to go into Egypt and know the story. Moses did what God told him to do, but he didn't want to. He first thing he said at the burning bush was, "I can't talk. I'm not a talker." He didn't want the assignment. He said he couldn't talk well enough. Then after he got the people across the Red Sea, he called on God that the people were too hard to handle. Well, I can imagine so. They were pessimists. And like I said, when you're around pessimists, everybody becomes pessimists, or most everybody. So can you imagine 2.4 million people complaining, not happy, grouchy, or saying, "Why did you bring us out here to die?" Don't look a minute. How did they turn out? Let's look at how the pessimists ended up in these three that I just talked about. Jonah was never heard from again. The Israelites, they died in the wilderness, and Moses wasn't allowed to enter the promised land. They all had their good points, but not having enough faith to believe that God would see them through hindered their complete calling. Now back to Moses. Some may not remember this, but God was going to kill Moses. Moses didn't do something that he was supposed to do. And that's in Exodus 4:24. But Moses' wife took care of it and made things right, and that's the Exodus 4:10 that Robert just had up there. Now we're going to be in the happy group. We're going to the optimists in the Bible. Now, like I said, these are just 4, 5 that I picked up. There's a lot of them in there, but these really stuck with me. Zacchaeus. Y'all remember Zacchaeus? He climbed a tall sycamore tree. He was short, and I imagine he was probably small. I want you to know how big a sycamore tree is. They are giant-sized trees. It can grow as tall as 98 to 130 feet, and its diameter or the width can be as big as 4.9 to 6.6 feet. Now that's big. A sycamore tree symbolizes strength, protection, eternity, and divinity. Just a little note there. Now that tree is still one of the top tourist attractions in Jericho. So that's just a little vacation thought there. The tree is still there, and it is a tourist attraction. Zacchaeus was a very short man, so it was probably hard getting him into that big tree to see Jesus. But he was an optimist and was determined to get in a good seeing place. So we have this big sycamore tree that may be anywhere from 98 to 130 feet, and Zacchaeus knows that he's short, and he knows he's small, and that tree is tall. So how was he going to get up in that tree? Was he going to be able to stretch far? I don't know how he got in that tree, but he did it. He was determined to get in that tree to see Jesus. So undoubtedly, Jesus was impressed with Zacchaeus because he ended up going to his house to eat with him. Zacchaeus was not a likable person. He was a tax collector, and nobody liked him. So I don't imagine anybody was going to volunteer to help him get in that tree. Now, like I said, that's just my opinion. They probably didn't help him. So he got in that tree, and Jesus came along, like the little song says, "Zacchaeus, come down, I'm going to your house today." So Jesus knew that Zacchaeus was up in that tall tree looking at him or watching him. And to me, Zacchaeus was optimistic because he could have just turned around and said, "I'm too short, I'm too small, I can't see Jesus. I'm just going to go home. There's nothing I can do." He didn't. He was determined. He was optimistic. He was going to get in that tree to see Jesus. That's in Luke 19, 1 through 10. You're going to read the story. Okay, now Jesus, of course, was optimistic. I mean, we're Christians. We're like Christ. So, of course, Jesus was optimistic. But I want to explain to you why I put him on the list, because we already know that he was. Satan tempted him for 40 days and nights, and Jesus resisted him at each temptation and used scripture talking to Satan. He didn't just tell Satan. He used scripture saying, you're not supposed to tempt the Lord, your God. Jesus knew what his mission was, and he never stopped even when he was on the cross. He said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." He was even positive on the cross. He didn't curse anyone. He still loves us. On the cross, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." He could have very easily said, I'm through, send the angels down to get me and destroy all of them. But he didn't. He loves us, and he loved the people that crucified him. So, to me, yes, Jesus was optimistic, and it's in Matthew 4, 1 through 11. It's where I got my proof from. Of course, there's other things, but that particular area of the Bible. Now, Noah. Noah found favor with God in Genesis 6, 8 through 10 and 18. It had been a very long time since it had rained. In some interpretations, it's thought it had never rained. They'd never seen rain. But that's not mentioned in the Bible. So we're going to just say it was a very long time since it had ever rained. Well, Noah was ridiculed by these people. I mean, here he is building an ark in well, I guess you could say a desert, because there's not been any rain. They didn't probably, like I said, might not even know what rain was. But for a long time, he didn't build an ark overnight either. You can read the story in the Bible about Noah building the ark. But he was optimistic. If he'd been pessimistic, he would have just said, "No, God, I'm not doing it." Now, God may have found somebody else at that point, because if you turn down God, when God tells you to do something, you tell him long enough, he won't ask you anymore. He'll find somebody else that will do it. So he did not say no. He went and got the materials. He did exactly what God, he used the instructions that God gave him, and he did it. He got the animals came to him. So I'm saying he was optimistic. In my thinking, he was optimistic, because that was a hard thing to do. Now, I just mentioned a few minutes ago about the Israel, about Joshua and Caleb. They were the only ones that crossed over into the promised land. And Moses, after all he went through getting them people there, he didn't get to. I mean, God was angry with Moses. He did not let him know. People says, well, God is not harsh. Yes, he is. He wants us to act like his people. And he does punish us. And in this case, he actually punished Moses and all the people that he got that was escaped slavery. They all died. That generation, all of them died except Joshua and Caleb. They were allowed to go in the promised land. And to me, that was because when they were sent over with 10 other spies to look into the promised land, to look in Canaan, they saw giants. And immediately, the other 10 said, we can't do it. They were pessimists. We can't do it. We can't fight those giants. They're too big. They're too ugly. We can't do it. We're going to have to stay here. They're pessimists. They didn't even try. But Joshua and Caleb were optimists, because they went back and said, we can do it. We can do it right now. Let's go right now. They were very optimistic, because they said, with God's help, we can do it. Well, the leaders didn't listen to them, and they didn't go, and it angered God, because God made that promise, and he wanted them to accept his promise and go into the promised land. The only ones that went, that were allowed to go, was Joshua and Caleb. That's my list of optimists. Now, I have a list of what ifs. Y'all give me comments on this. We're not going to have a timer on this list. I want you to think about it and just put in your comments what you think. What if Daniel had been a pessimist? Remember Daniel, the lion's den. What if he had been a pessimist? He was an optimist, but what would have happened, or what could have happened if he was not an optimist? Think about that a second. Do I have any answers? Okay. He probably already knew about others being thrown into that lion's den and being eaten alive. He probably heard people talking about him being next to be eaten by the hungry lions. He could have easily become depressed, worried, scared, and see no hope. However, he trusted God, he prayed and believed. We know the rest of the story. If you don't, read Daniel chapter 6. it tells you about the lion's den. Okay, but Daniel, and the king has ordered to be thrown into the lion's den. And the king likes you, but people were against you and against Daniel, and they talked the king, telling the king that Daniel didn't do what he's supposed to do. So I mean, read the story. I don't have to get into it. He gets there. He finds out he's going to be thrown into the lion's den. There, other people had probably been thrown in there. The lions were top of prosecution. You were eaten by the lions alive. He could have been, before he was put in there, he could become very depressed, scared, cried, whined, complained, all that. But he didn't. He remained optimistic because he knew God. He had no doubt. He had all this faith that God was going to take care of him. He was going to protect him. And we know the story about the lions, what happened. If you don't, read it. I'm not going to tell you. Read the book. I'm going to say that a lot. Okay, another one, Ruth. Our Sunday school class not long ago had lessons on love stories, romantic love stories in the Bible. And Ruth, the book of Ruth was one of them. I hope y'all remember what we talked about. Anyway, Ruth, what if she had been a pessimist? What could have happened to Ruth? What do y'all think would have happened to Ruth? Any ideas? Okay. When she could have left her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law, remember her name was Naomi. And Ruth's husband died. Her brother-in-law died. And her father-in-law died. Naomi's 2 sons and her husband all died. Well, Naomi, there was 2 daughter-in-laws. Remember, it's Naomi and Oprah. I don't know how to pronounce it. Anyway, when her sons and her husband died, Naomi told her daughter-in-laws, which was Ruth and the other one, to leave. I mean, she was insistent. Remember, I told you this story. She was insistent that they leave. Well, the other daughter-in-law, she finally left. But remember, they both loved Naomi. So that means Naomi must have been a good person, a lovable person. She must have been optimistic, happy, because, I mean, the scripture says that she was a happy person. But when her husband and her sons died, that all changed. She became very bitter, became a very bitter person and pessimistic person. And she didn't even look herself. That's how bad she got. But her other Ruth did not leave. She went with Naomi. Everywhere Naomi went, she went with Naomi back to her homeland. And like I said, this is the story that we talked about. Anyway, if Ruth had done like the other daughter-in-law and left, what would have happened? Or what could have happened? Any ideas? Any ideas? Okay. Ruth stayed with her mother-in-law. And we know how the story ends. If you don't, read the book of Ruth. Read it again. We read it once, but read it again because it is a fantastic love story. It's very, very good. It's very uplifting to think that they went through all this, and Ruth ended up in a very good position, and so did Naomi. So read the book of Ruth. Okay. We've already talked about Zacchaeus, so we can talk about him one more time here. What if he had been a pessimist? I think I told you a few minutes ago. What if Zacchaeus had been a pessimist and he looked at that tree? What could have happened? Any ideas? Okay. He could have looked at that tree and said, that tree's too big. I have no way to chop it down. I wouldn't want to chop it down because, there's nothing else to get on. There's no roofs, nothing here I can get on. I can't climb the tree. I'm too small. I'm too short. Nobody's going to help me. So I'm just going to go home. But if he'd done that, he would have missed his blessing. getting in that tree, he was able to meet Jesus personally. He was able to eat with him. Jesus ate with him. So to me, Zacchaeus was optimistic. Even though he was not liked, he was a tax collector, he was still optimistic. For him to climb up that tree, telling himself, I can do this because I want to see him. And Jesus ate with him. That's how impressed Jesus was. He told him, come out of that tree, we're going to eat together. And so he not only saw Jesus, he talked to him one-on-one. So that, to me, is an optimistic person. Okay, what about Joseph? Now, the last several weeks, I've been doing my devotion on Joseph. So some of you should already know where I'm going with this one. Joseph, which was Jacob and Rachel's son, what if he had been a pessimist? Now, he went through a lot. He went through a whole lot. So he had every reason or possible excuse to be a pessimist. So what if he did not do what he did? What would have happened if he had not continued to trust in God? He went through a lot. Okay. It took over 14 years for Joseph's dreams to come true. He went from being sold by his brothers. That's enough to get you depressed right there, to think that your own brothers, half-brothers, sold you into slavery. Of course, we know why. They were jealous of Joseph. They sold him into slavery in Egypt at the age of 17. He wasn't even an adult. He was still a child. 17 is still a child. He went at the age of 17 to being the overseer of the food at 30 years old. So we're talking about 14 years of this. He was Joseph's life as a slave and prisoner was within God's will and purposes. So Joseph, he ended up in prison, and I'm going to stop it right there. I want you to read it. Read the book. Read the book, and you know which book I'm talking about, right? Which is Genesis 37 through 41. Read it. It's very, very interesting. You read all these fiction books. This isn't fiction. It's real. It happened. So when you look at these chapters about Joseph, starting from the very beginning about Joseph through the famine, it's very, very interesting. And he was very optimistic because he believed in God the whole time. God helped him. God interpreted dreams. That's how Joseph got so popular with all the higher ups. So read it. Genesis 37 through 41. If you don't know the story, you need to read it. That's your assignment. Okay. Now, I'm going to give you a personal experience. Angie Ainsworth, I'm sorry, but I'm fixing to use you as my example. Are you ready? Okay. I want to confess something about myself that happened last June. I'm going to read it. That way I won't cry. This lesson that I'm teaching is not about me personally. Like I said, I'm optimistic, but I haven't always been optimistic. I have been pessimistic, and I'm going to explain why. Something happened to me last June. It's not about me, but I have experienced pessimism, depression, and hopelessness. I weighed 50 pounds more than I do now. I became worried about my health when bad things started happening to me. I became unable to walk any distance at all. I started riding a scooter when we went on trips. I couldn't even turn over in bed. I couldn't put my socks and shoes on without help. I'd have to call Robert to come help me. I couldn't even clip my toenails. I became unable to do the normal daily activities to keep healthy. I became unable. The thing that really made me want to change my situation was when I would be asleep in bed, the sound of my heartbeat and my ears would wake me up. My blood pressure was staying up. I had never had high blood pressure. I had never had diabetes. I was borderline. I could tell that my body was taking a beating. I was prayed for on numerous occasions, but I stayed the same. I was praying about it one night, and the Lord spoke to me. He said that He will do His part if I will do mine, which meant to start taking care of my body. We are all supposed to treat our bodies like temples, and mine was falling apart. I was so pessimistic about trying to make my life change. I would look in the mirror and step in the scales and tell myself that it was impossible. I was too far gone to do anything. I was extremely pessimistic. I could have just said I would just have to live with it and continue to gain weight and die a slow death. Then I found a real friend at church who had been dieting, walking, eating healthy for several months and had already lost 100 pounds. Every day she would send me a Facebook private message, and she still does because I'm still losing. I'm trying to lose. She'd send me a private message on Facebook, private Facebook message. Just a second. And we would send each other encouragement posts. Her optimism conquered my pessimism. Her contagiousness of optimism, I caught it. She didn't catch my pessimism. I caught her optimism. Her optimism and encouragement and prayers saved my life. It is true that pessimism is contagious, however, only if you're willing to accept it. Optimism is the complete opposite and is the best medicine against pessimism. It's your choice on how you want. It's your choice on how you want to act and feel. You know, that's part of that free will that God gives you. We're supposed to shine for the Lord. That is hard to do when you're mentally and physically depressed and unhappy. Okay, how was I supposed to be able to show anybody or tell anybody about Christ and shine my light when my flashlight was turned off? I mean, I didn't even have any batteries in my flashlight. That's how crucial I had gotten. But thankfully, with prayer, with Angie's encouragement, and everybody that I talked to encouraged me every time. That's the reason sometimes I put posts on Facebook or pictures of me on Facebook, because I start getting this. The enemy starts playing with my mind, saying, "Well, you're not accomplishing anything. You know, just eat like you want. Don't do anything. Just do what you want, and you'll still be happy." Well, that's the enemy talking to me. I don't want to do that anymore. That's not me anymore. I'm an optimistic person, and I like to be around optimistic people. Okay. Another thing, I'm going to talk about the Old Testament versus the New Testament for a minute. I've heard of people say, "Oh, we don't have to follow the Old Testament anymore. Well, Jesus came in the New Testament. We follow the New Testament." Well, that's fine and dandy, except for one thing. The heritage, the bloodline, like talking about Joseph, all these people that I named, need to know where they came from. And the Ten Commandments are in the Old Testament, and those are basic rules. So this about Old Testament does not matter anymore. I don't believe that. The Old Testament and New Testament together makes God's Word. It is the whole Bible, not just half the Bible. It's the whole Bible. It takes both Old and New to have the whole Bible, the whole thing. Now, let's see. All right. Plus, another thing about the Old Testament, God talked to people direct in the Old Testament. Because, like I said, we're talking about Moses and Noah. He actually talked to them direct. And, that's interesting to know. So, really, like I said, need to read the whole Bible. The Old Testament and New Testament are both important. Okay, now, the water. We're going to see what the tally was. We have optimistic. We had 5 that said full. Nobody said empty. Thank you. You did really well on that. Okay, my challenge for everybody tonight is for self-examination. Ask yourselves this question: do I want to hang around someone like me? Okay, if you're an optimist, yes, you do. You want to be an influence on other people. The problem is when you're optimist, you have to be, and you hang around with the pessimists, you've got, like I said, it's contagious. Like this virus, this pandemic that's going around, it is very contagious. Pessimism is. So if you're an optimist and you hang around with the pessimists because they're your friend, don't let it wear off on you. You let yourself wear off on them. Um, One thing that I'm going to disagree with on my research was somebody said that it's not good to be happy all the time. Now, I wish I'd gotten the name, but just because somebody says something doesn't mean I believe it. And this I don't believe. If you're happy all the time, that's wonderful. That's good for your body. It's good for your physically and mentally and your confidence in yourself. It is very good to be happy all the time. Now, how they came up with the idea that it's not, I don't know. I have no idea how they came. It sounded like a kook to me. Um, God expects us to shine our light for Him. If you're grumpy, depressed, and frowning, and saying or thinking negative things, I said over 20% of the time of the day, you can't be a friend to those unless they are pessimists. Also, you can't be a friend unless they're pessimists too. Like I said, if you're optimist hanging around with the pessimists, don't let them give you their disease. I believe the verse about not to forsake the gathering together in one place has a good explanation. Yes, you do not have to go to church, but think about this for a minute. We all have contact sometime or another with the pessimist. We're not around happy people all the time. Sad to say, it'd be nice if we were, but we're not around them optimists all the time. We have to encounter pessimists, and for one thing, you have to if you're going to talk about Jesus to them. So you got to be able to resist the disease of pessimism. You want them to catch your optimism. We all have contact with the pessimist sometime or other. We need to spend as much time together as possible with people who think like we do. Therefore, like I said, where two or three are gathered, and people say they can watch church on TV. Yeah, you can, but there is no atmosphere there. You do not have the hugs. You do not have the encouraging words. You do not have people saying, "Oh, you look so pretty. You're looking so good. You look so happy." That makes you feel good. Plus the fact that you get to worship with them. Yeah, it's amazing when you can raise your hands at the altar or in the sanctuary and praise the Lord together. Now you can do that in your home with other people, but like I said, it's something about the atmosphere in church. It's important, at least to me. I don't know who else. Anybody else? It's very important. So when people say, "Well, you don't have to go to church to be saved," yeah, that's true. You don't. But for one, why wouldn't you want to go to church? What's the reason for not going to church? If you're saying, "Well, they're all hypocrites," you're a pessimist. You cannot judge people by saying they're a hypocrite because you don't know. If you're that pessimistic to not go to church because you think everybody's a hypocrite, you need to be in church. You're the one that needs to be in church if you're thinking that way. Okay, which one are you? We all want to be blessed and highly favored by God, right? Let's make every effort to be as kind, loving, and patient as we can every day and pass it on to others to do the same. So that's how I'm concluding this lesson. Lesson is we need to be the best that we can be. We need to see as many people as we can see. That's what I like about Facebook. I think Pastor said something about Pastor used to not like Facebook, but he has seen we can really witness to people through Facebook. Like I said, I'm thankful for this technology. So with that being said, everyone, like I said, look at your heart, look in your mind, your heart. Think about it. Pray to God. Am I really happy? Am I really doing the best I can? Am I encouraging other people? What can I do, Lord, that will be good, good for you? I'm going to say one more thing that's not in my notes. One thing, I am not an outgoing person. I'm going to end my lesson with this. I am not an outgoing person. As a matter of fact, I'm out of my comfort zone right now. I've said this over and over again. I'm out of my comfort zone. But I am not an outgoing person. And one time I used to have Barney Fife from Andy Griffith Show, Don Knotts. I used to have a tag on the front of my vehicle because he was my hero. I guess you'd say hero. I liked him. I liked the show. And when he died, it dawned on me. I said, he was just a person. So just the tag, I started praying about it. I said, Lord, what can I do to honor you? What can I do to be bold, or what can I do to witness for you without actually um going up to somebody? That's how shy I was. And we were at a flea market, Ham Flea Market, and we came across this guy that was making tags. And this popped in my head, and it's on the front of my vehicle. It says, Maranatha, are you ready? Are you ready, Maranatha? If you don't know what Maranatha means, look it up. I'm doing like a teacher now. I'm not going to give you all the answers. You're going to have to get out there. You're going to have to get over there and research. You can Google it, or you can look it up. You can ask somebody. If you just research it yourself. But on my tag it says, Maranatha, are you ready? And that's how I'm going to end it. Good night, and hope to see you real soon in the church. Love you all. Miss you.